Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We do have a good one for you on the show. We are talking about some of the takeaways from a new Washington Post investigation called the Pegasus Project, where military-grade spyware leased by the Israeli firm NSO Group to governments for tracking terrorists and criminals was used in attempted and successful hacks of 37 smartphones belonging to journalists, human rights activists, business executives, and two women closest to murdered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, according to a new investigation from Washington Post and various groups, journalist groups around the world. We'll tell you what they used this data for, the people who were spied on, and the consequences it had. Also, Frito Lay workers are going on strike, or they're actually on strike. They're 14 days into it. They're fighting for better conditions. They say that forced overtime, bad pay, bad working conditions is just making life unattainable for them, or unbearable for them to continue to work at that factory. We'll take you through some of their complaints and how you can support them and how you can make sure they get through the strike. But first, we start today with the latest going on in Haiti, where Claude Joseph, Haiti's acting president or acting prime minister, is stepping down. He's been the country's leader in the aftermath of the assassination of President Jovenel Moise, and he will now have to hand power to Ariel Henry, the elections minister said. Yeah, we'll take a look at this very kind of interesting, and I would say, I think it's fair to say this is like it's always some suspect transition to power. Not always the most democratic things can happen in Haiti. If you want to learn more about Haiti's history, of course, well, we did an episode for you about that. That's Hidden History. New episode came out last Thursday about that for our second season. Go check it out. It's available everywhere. All right, so let's get into this. This is here from the New York Times. So Claude Joseph, the prime minister who immediately took control of Haiti's government after the assassination of President Jovenel Moise this month, is stepping down, the nation's minister for elections said in a text message on Monday. So kind of a weird way. Just, oh yeah, you get a text message, oh, we're getting a new president soon. I mean, I really don't know how many people in Haiti probably do have access to these text messages in a major basis and are easily accessible, since obviously most of the population a really large part of the population is even illiterate. So let alone having phones, it would be probably pretty tough. So ever since the president's assassination on the 7th, Haitian politicians have been at loggerheads grappling for control of the government. So Joseph had been scheduled to be replaced this week, the week of the killing. But the newly appointed Prime Minister, Ariel Henry, had yet to be sworn in. So that's pretty much what happened. Literally, so it's very weird, and we're still kind of working on sussing out the motivations. Who are the factions at play here? Like, what separates Henry from Moise, from Joseph, et cetera, and, how do their profiles stack up when it comes to just pretty much the pure basis of like what they're fighting for, and more importantly, which more elite factions they're representing, because pretty much everybody in this situation is representing some, every Haitian politician is representing somebody bigger than themselves, really, or one elite faction, one elite family of the 12 families that rule Haiti, as we talked about, who are French, Middle Eastern, and other places in Europe, but mostly French and Middle Eastern. But the crazy thing about this, Joseph, he was the prime minister under Moise, and he was scheduled to be replaced the week of the killing, just a few days after Moise was killed, but the new by Ariel Henry. But Henry had yet to be sworn in. Both declared themselves again to be the legitimate prime ministers, setting off a power struggle that threatened further to destabilize a country that had already been gripped by months of street protest over Moise's rule. At least one senator had called Joseph's move to run the country and imposed a state of siege after the assassination a form of a coup. But on Monday, the Minister for Elections, Matthias Pierre, said in a text message that Joseph would step down in favor of Ariel Henry. And the president of Haiti's Senate, Joseph Lambert, said pressure from American diplomats had been a major factor in the reshuffling of Haiti's leadership. So Joseph Lambert saying that Haiti had become a baseball being thrown between foreign diplomats, and it really seems like that has always been the way it is, and these diplomats really being much more like kind of larger instruments for Haiti in terms of capital and being the people, much larger instruments for global capital and getting the most that they can out of Haiti, and kind of just keeping it down. But still managing to extract the most natural resources and kind of agricultural production that it can. It's like some of the top 12 rich families own something like 99% of all the wealth that there is to own there in Haiti, and a lot of that gets funneled out through other sources and to other more global interests. So on Saturday night, Dr. Henry released a pre-recorded speech addressing the Haitian people on social media channels. He saluted the majority of the Haitian people in what he called the face of what could be a coup d'etat, and he asked the nation's political actors to walk along the peaceful path that Haiti's people have followed. He said he would announce shortly that who would be a part of his cabinet while gathering a sufficient consensus to lead an interim government until conditions were met for elections, stopping short of calling it a transition. So pretty much what's going to be here is what you can probably expect is the following. Conditions are pretty much settled down. The normal order is back in place because, as we talked about in our first episode on this, there has been some sort of there has been a growing kind of revolutionary excitement, or just not necessarily explicitly revolutionary, but the violence and the willingness for discontent has been a big incentive, or been a big thing that a lot of people have been worrying about for quite a long time. So so what he said is what he said, and what I think is going to happen is they're going to pretty much calm things down, and then they're going to work to pretty much put in for an election nobody from, as we talked about on Thursday, the Lavalas party that we saw, RSD, probably the most popular president, also the most left-wing president, coincidentally, as he was the only person who arose from that party before pretty much Lavalas was wiped off the face of the map for being, they didn't have enough signatures, they didn't have enough support, although of course they did, but they just were not allowed to really compete in elections. So pretty much the conditions are going to be made so that a pro-U.S. person can win, and then you have to imagine, unless something crazy happens, a lot of the same conditions will be put back in place, and a lot of the status quo will kind of continue uninterrupted for the people of Haiti. It's very, very sad to see. He said, this is the new guy, I appeal to the altruism of the Haitian patriots to surpass themselves in order to face together the dangers which threaten us all and jeopardize the very existence of the nation. The political standoff in the wake of the assassination was made all the more complicated by the fact that many of the nation's democratic institutions had been hollowed out during Moise's term in office. So only 10 senators remained out of 30 because the terms of the other 20 had expired and the elections were not held to replace them. The lower house is entirely vacant. Its members' terms expired last year, leaving Moise to govern by decree for more than a year before he was killed. Beyond that, the head of Haiti's highest court died in COVID-19 in June, depriving the country of yet another means of deciding who should govern next. Because normally, I think what they either have is they have the Chief Justice decide, or the Chief Justice actually is the kind of caretaker until there can't be elections based on one of Haiti's constitutions. So yeah, it is a very, very, very complicated thing. And this, of course, comes through, as we talked about, Moise's big struggle to stay in for pretty much an extra year in the wake of the fact that his power, what he contends is his term was really official in the year 2017. Of course, there's 5-year terms, so his term would be over by that much in 2022. His term was official, and all the delays, all the things that were settled out, and all the kind of disputes that had to be settled around his election, they took about a year to settle. He contends that his term officially started in the, I believe it was like January or February 2020 or 2016, so it should go to 2022. But the Haitian Constitution says that pretty much doesn't matter the delays. Your term starts the January or February. I forget which one again it is. It starts the January or February after you were originally elected. Delays don't matter. So that pretty much led a lot of these senators to resign or not really. That set up the stage really quite well for Moise to govern by decree. So, in the middle of the dispute, the remaining members of the nation's Senate also weighed in, saying that Senate President Mr. Lambert should lead Haiti because he's probably the closest person to actually being somewhat democratically elected, at least to a certain degree. So Lambert would probably add, though, the thing is more confusion to the caustic dispute over who should govern. So the so-called core group of powerful foreign governments and international organizations that exercise great influence in Haiti, including the UN, Organization of American States, the European Union, the U.S., France, Spain, Canada, and Germany and Brazil, called on Saturday for the formation of a consensual and inclusive government. So that we're going to get to a fact sheet on the core group in a second. To this end, the group strongly encourages the Prime Minister-designate Ariel Henry to continue the mission entrusted to him to form such a government. Again, this guy he was appointed. He was not replaced. He was not democratically elected or anything like that. He was appointed, and he was supposed to be the replacement for Claude Joseph, who was the kind of newer member of a faction, or more conservative right-wing faction that's been present and powerful in Haiti for a long time. So, yeah. Just to talk about less so what we know about the kind of assassination here just quickly. The assassination pretty much stoked fear. At the center of the plot was, of course, Christian Emmanuel Sanon, the doctor with ties to Florida, described as playing a central role in the death of the president. He kind of thought he would be able to, somehow install himself as president of the country after Moise was killed, but that obviously doesn't look like it's going to work now. 2 Americans are among the at least 20 people who have been detained thus far. Several of the people under investigation met in the months before the killing, discussed rebuilding the country once the president was out of power, Haitian police said. The assassination of Moise comes after years of instability, obviously, which is we talked about many, many times here on SWN over the past few weeks. So shortly after the assassination, the United States said it recognized Joseph as the incumbent and would work with him as such. It's not immediately clear what caused international actors to switch and throw their weight behind Henry, so Ariel Henry, the new guy. So just before we talk a little bit more about the group that's picking the leader, let's get some reaction around the country. It's not their say, it's our say. Valinia Chartier said, who was an activist with the anti-corruption group Nous Pas Dormi, which led large protests against the government 2 years ago, said of the jockeying by the nation's political leaders, "We are the ones who have to manage and find a way to live in this country together." Senator Lambert, one of the 10 remaining elected officials in the country, has been among those aiming to fill the void left by Moise's killing. And it's going to be interesting. I don't know exactly Lambert's politics, to be quite honest, but I think it would be interesting to see if because he at least seems to have tried to make himself or pushing himself forward as a figurehead or just somebody who is going to be there to force some sort of action, I guess to say, for at least some sort of action in a more democratic direction for the people of Haiti post a lot of what's going on with the Moise assassination here. At least he wants to see some sort of democratic way that could ingratiate himself to some of the people in Haiti. That's certainly a possibility. After 8 of his fellow senators and several political parties declared that he should become the provisional president, he announced a week ago that he was going to be sworn in by the parliament. Then he promptly postponed. While he explained in a tweet the decision had been to allow senators to be present for the nomination, on Sunday he said the real reason was pressure from American diplomats. I received calls from certain American diplomats in Haiti. Also, I received calls from diplomats in the United States State Department who asked me to postpone so we had time to build a larger consensus, he said. Rather than a consensus, the core group of international actors had imposed a unilateral proposal. They always say the solution has to be Haitian, but this is not a Haitian solution, says Senator Lambert, a powerful politician first elected in 1990 who grew up desperately poor in Haiti's south, one of 11 children of an illiterate fisherman and a street vendor mother. The risk of allowing decisions to be guided by foreign powers, he said, was further unrest. 95 to 97% of political parties will not accept this. They don't accept this unilateral proposal. It's certain there won't be an election. Even if there are elections, the results will be refuted, and Haiti will continue on this spiral of instability. That's really what a lot of people fear is going to be the case. But let's talk a little bit more about this core group. This is from the Black Alliance for Peace, a people-centered human rights project against war, repression, and imperialism, kind of black left-wingers who are taking a big interest in Haiti. So let's take a look at this. Really uncertain but influential group called the Core Group So let's talk about what the core group is. They've first been convened in 2004 under the authority of the UN Security Council resolution that led to military invasion and foreign occupation of Haiti. The core group is a self-styled council consisting of the diplomats of foreign countries with political and economic interests in Haiti, combined with the representatives of a number of multilateral organizations and agencies, including the IMF and the World Bank. While the membership of the core group has fluctuated since its initial formation, it currently has 9 members: Brazil, Canada, France, Germany, Spain, the U.S., the EU, the Organization of American States, and the UN organization. Significantly, the group has never had a Haitian representative and often meets without Haitian representation. So pretty much making the point clear and obvious that Haitians and their voices are not really mattered or are not really weighted very heavily at all in this situation. This is a country that pretty much since at least the United States invaded it in the early 1900s has been under some form of occupation, either indirectly or directly, in kind of the neo-occupation, the neo-colonialism that we see in so much of the global South today. That either that's been happening or it's been, in some cases, like with the United States, it's been direct invasion. People, and a lot of what's happening with the UN, where they're going around giving cholera to Haitians and raping Haitian women, that was, I'd say, probably more direct occupation. But, you know, it changes, it fluctuates. But one thing is common, which is Haiti just never really has been free. So the core group is a self-styled council consisting of diplomats of foreign countries, political and economic interests in Haiti, combined with the representatives of a number of multilateral organizations and agencies, including the IMF and World Bank. The purpose core group serves is to set up. It was set up to originally coordinate the various branches and elements of the UN occupation in Haiti, which is called MINUSTAH. MINUSTA, you know, I guess what you could call it. It's neither neutral nor passive, and the core group has worked and played really an active interventionist role in Haiti's everyday political affairs. It's worked to extend and protect foreign economic interests in Haiti, and it's consistently intervened in Haiti's sovereign political affairs, often without collaboration or consent of the Haitian government. Importantly, there's no prescribed term limit on the core group's mandate. Theoretically, it could be in place in perpetuity, some kind of a group colonialism, a world colonialism, just a group tag team exploitation of this country for as long as possible. The core group is unelected and unaccountable to the Haitian people, and the core group is the imperial power behind the throne of the Moise regime, and will likely be the imperial power behind the throne of the Henry regime, which is pretty much why they picked him, because they thought he would be the best guy. Will bring you more reasons as to why they thought that he would be acceptable over someone like Joseph in future days, but the point is, the core group's influence predates Moise and will continue after he is deposed, and will continue, and we see it continuing now. The core group is an arbiter of neocolonial indirect rule in Haiti. Moreover, its presence in Haiti is based on a basic racist assumption that the Haitian people cannot govern themselves. Haiti is ungovernable, and Haiti needs the paternalistic guidance of foreign powers. It does not matter that Haiti's democratic failures are due to meddling and destabilization by oftentimes the members of that very core group. The core group represents an insidious example of neocolonialism driven by white supremacy. By effectively acting as the neocolonial trustees of Haiti, the core group has undermined Haiti's sovereignty and autonomy while crippling Haiti's efforts at democratic self-determination. As such, the Black Alliance for Peace demands the dissolution of the core group, the release of all correspondent minutes, the documentation produced by the core group of Haitian affairs, a forensic and financial commercial interest accounting of all financial and commercial interests of the core group members in Haiti. So that's really what they want to see there. The Black Alliance for Peace, giving you a little bit of information about this group. Coming up next, a global spy project led by an Israeli firm called the NSO Group. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. I want to tell you a little bit about our lineup for this summer. We start off with Newsflash, all new, of course, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can't miss it. It's our flagship show to get caught up on everything happening in the world around you. but stick around for some history and some entertainment. Learn about all the things you never learned in history class every Thursday with Hidden History, and get ready for a fun night out or turn your living room into the club with uncultured live mixes every Saturday all summer long. The Spencer Walsh Radio Network is your home for summer sounds coming all season long. Every podcast is available everywhere, so you have no excuse not to listen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting into this very, very interesting situation that we are seeing right now in with this military-grade spyware that's been leased, and it really speaks to the big relationship that so many states all across this world, kind of backed on by, of course, the United States and people associated with them, have with the Israeli government. So what they were doing here is this Israeli firm, the NSO Group, has been leasing military-grade spyware to governments for tracking terrorists and criminals, and it was used in the attempted and successful hacks of 37 smartphones belonging to journalists, human rights activists, business executives, and the two women closest to murdered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, according to investigation by the Washington Post and 16 media partners led by the Paris-based journalism nonprofit Forbidden Stories. So they and Amnesty International human rights group had access to a list of more than 50,000 numbers it shared with the news organizations, which did further research and analysis. So here are some of the key takeaways from the investigation. So phones identified a sprawling list of 37 targeted smartphones appearing to be on a list of more than 50,000 numbers that are concentrated in countries known to engage in surveillance of their citizens and also known to be have been clients of the NSO Group, a worldwide leader in the growing, largely unregulated private spyware industry, the investigation found. So what I think is always fair to say, like, whatever investigation, whatever thing you think is happening with the or expectations that we publicly know what's going on in terms of spying in our governments, especially privately, by private industry, which is probably going to be the next path, because a lot of the stuff, as the government kind of gets more phased out of everyday life and so much of the government becomes privatized, and so much of the government just becomes various outfits contracting out to private industry, we're going to see a lot more of really all these bad things, more exploitation and especially a lot more spying, which is why a lot of people, a lot of liberals especially, were really quite foolish to dismiss out of hand Tucker Carlson's spying claims. It sounds crazy, but the chances are that he wasn't in some way, at least in some point, peripherally spied on, or his data in some way tangentially collected by people in the United States government is, they're certainly not worth dismissing out of hand, knowing what we know about the United States government. So, what pretty much what happens here is, and I think what always a safe assumption is so whatever you assume the United States government is doing, or just the global, however much you assume you're being spied on by whatever force you want to choose or whatever organization you want to talk about, whether it be a group like the NSO Group or the Israeli government or the American government, you should probably just double it, or triple it or quadruple it, because they are doing this stuff, and a lot of stuff you're not going to even know about until 10, 20, 30 years down the road, even longer in some cases. So it's really, really clear that a lot of this stuff is going on, and, hopefully we'll find out about it in time to stop it, at least. But the list does not identify who put the numbers on it or why, and it's unknown how many of the phones are targeted or surveilled in this 37-person list. But the forensic analysis of the 37 phones shows that many display a tight correlation between timestamps associated with a number on the list and the initiation of surveillance attempts, in some cases as brief as a few seconds. Politicians, journalists, and activists were found on this target list. The numbers on the list were unattributed, but reporters were able to identify more than 1,000 people spanning more than 50 countries through research and interviews on 4 continents. Several Arab royal family members, at least 65 business executives, 85 human rights activists, 189 journalists, and more than 600 politicians and government officials, including cabinet ministers, diplomats, and security officers, as well as several heads of state and prime ministers. The purpose of the list could not be conclusively determined. The company says it polices its clients for abuses. The targeting of the 37 smartphones would appear to conflict with the stated purpose of the NSO's licensing of the Pegasus spyware, which the company says is intended for use in surveilling terrorists and major criminals. When has that ever, when in the world has spying only ever been for just stopping terrorism or stopping major criminals? The evidence extracted from these smartphones, revealed here for the first time, calls into question pledges by the Israeli company to police its clients for human rights abuses. So this NSO chief executive, Shalev Julio, says Sunday that he was very concerned by the Post reports. We are checking every allegation, and if some allegations are true, we will take stern allegation and we will terminate contracts like we did. Stern action, and we will terminate contracts like we did in the past. He said, if anybody did any kind of surveillance on journalists, even if it's not by Pegasus, it's disturbing. Of course, we see the brief, the very strong, very forceful public reaction there, which is nice, but really does not mean a whole lot. So let's delve into exactly who these people were trying to go after here. The list, so pretty much the phones appeared on a list of more than 50,000 numbers that are concentrated in countries, again, known to engage in surveillance of their citizens and also known to have been clients of this Israeli firm. An NSO group here. A worldwide leader is growing. World leader in this growing and largely unregulated private spyware industry. So, let's see. Among the journalists whose numbers appear to be on the list, which dates back to 2016. Since 2016 at least, they've been doing this. Are reporters working overseas for several leading news organizations, including a small number of CNN, AP, VOA, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg News, Le Monde in France, and the Financial Times in London, and the Al Jazeera in Qatar. A small number, though, was only meant to be there for CNN. The purpose of targeting of 37 smartphones would appear to conflict again with the stated purpose of this licensing program. So I'm trying to get here at least a list of some of the names, but the NSO describes its customers as 60 intelligence, military, and law enforcement agencies in 40 countries, although it will not confirm the identity of any of them, citing confidential allegations. The consortium found many of the phone numbers in at least 10 country clusters, which was subjected to deeper analysis, which were Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Hungary, India, Kazakhstan, Mexico, Morocco, Rwanda, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Citizen Lab has found evidence that all 10 have been clients of NSO, and that just shows that some of their journalism has been, some of their people have been attacked by or infiltrated by some of this spyware and some of this purpose. Or they have used this to do some spying in some illicit way. Let's go in a little bit more to this. This is interesting here. The Apple iPhone has been shown to be vulnerable. The discovery on a list of phone numbers of 37 smartphones that had either been penetrated or attacked with Pegasus spyware fuels the debate over whether Apple has done enough to ensure the security of its devices, popular the world over for their reputation for resisting hacking attempts. 34 of the 37 phones were iPhones, so it shows that a lot of this stuff has been manipulated, has been torn away, and of course, you got to assume this stuff exists and people use it because it's able to get past iPhones, because iPhones are probably used by like a third of the world at least. New details of the hacking carry worldwide implications. So among 37 of the phones confirmed to have been targeted, 10 were in India, another 5 were in Hungary, most linked to journalists, activists, or business people. The finding will add to concerns about extra-legal government surveillance conducted with private spyware in both countries. Hundreds more numbers from India and Hungary appear on the broader global list. Each country says it acts legally in carrying out its surveillance activity. And, who the hell knows what influence here the United States has in their in this ability to surveil. And the question is, it may not just even be the United States. It could be India, it could be China, it could be Saudi Arabia reading your text messages and emails. And of course, a lot of the stuff not really mentioning the United States influence here in the Washington Post, which I think is always worth an eyebrow raise. But still, any kind of surveillance is not anything you want to see. All right, let's get to our next story, and it is a situation going on with Frito Lay. Hundreds of Frito Lay workers, from Vice here, are at strike in a production plant in Topeka, Kansas that makes Fritos, Tostitos, Doritos, Cheetos, and Funyuns. So really, really appalling working conditions. And let's take a look. This is Mark McCarter here speaking to Lauren Cowrie-Gurley. He's a 59-year-old palletizer and union steward at Frito Lay, who's worked at the Topeka factory for 37 years, talking about how his job sucks and why he's striking. He says, "I've worked at the Frito Lay factory in Topeka, Kansas since I was 19, straight out of high school, and probably one of the few times that you can actually get a job straight out of high school and is actually something that can pay your bill. I think a sign of health is you shouldn't have to go to college in order to be able to find a job that you can live a middle-class life with. That used to be something in America that was very easy to do. You didn't have to go to college. You could just go work in a factory like this and be able to work kind of comfortably, not have the best conditions. You maybe be a little bit economically precarious, but you would not be anywhere near the same type of situation, the same type of angst that a lot of people find themselves in today with this, really, really tough working conditions that we are seeing. He's worked there for 37 years, and he says he still gets forced to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. 7 years ago, he said, "My wife passed away, and I spent a lot of time in grief counseling, and I told the company I don't want to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week." 12 hours a day. 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Working from getting up at 8 to 8. I could not imagine doing that. I honestly cannot imagine. That is just inhumane in and of itself. 12 hours a day. Just think about that over and over again in your head. And doing that for 37 years. Wow. The idea that the next time anybody ever tells you that Americans are lazy and don't want to work, just laugh in their face. Because, come on. Every single piece of evidence, every single piece of research, shows you that a lot of, especially working class Americans, are incredibly hardworking, will lock themselves into these schedules, will lock themselves into these really poor arrangements because they just don't know any better way. And a lot of times the people who are making these allegations are the people who are working the least hard and also contributing the least to society. So be very careful when you hear that coming out of someone's mouth, and be even more careful if you're saying it. If you're calling other Americans, especially poor and working class Americans, lazy, then I'm assuming that, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that's a lot of projection there. So I ended up getting the Family Medical Leave Act unpaid leave, but they're still having me do it. Sometimes you come in at 7 a.m., and not only do you work 8 hours, but when you get off at 3 p.m., they suicide, which is force you to work a double shift, and you have to come back at 3 a.m. There's 850 employees, and that's true for half or three-quarters of them. The job wears you down. It tires you. It makes you mentally exhausted. It plays with your mind. Some of these guys who work 12 hours a day every day, are destroying their marriages. They're destroying their families. My wife passed away, and I don't have to wife to go home to say, "Hey, babe, I'm only working 8 hours tomorrow." Only. Yeah. But a lot of these guys come in with the understanding that they'll be here for 8 hours, and then they got to call to their wives and say, "Guess what? It's not 8 hours. It's 12 hours, and then I have to go back to work at 3 a.m., in the middle of that same shift." That is intolerable. How can anybody, not just the worker, but their wife, their kid, their family, how can they expect to go? Think about how many baseball games, how many fun nights out, how many just spending time with your family and being able to just live your life. How much that leaves out, just really awful. Frito Lay has been told they need to fix this, but unfortunately, when they bring in new people, they force the same schedule on them and they quit. Frito Lay has waited so long to replace workers, and now Frito Lay has a horrible reputation, so a lot of people won't work here. I think a lot of people are pushed to the edge. COVID created some of this. During COVID, managers got to work from home. People see that and realize they have other options. Really, COVID was a bit of a blessing in disguise for a lot of workers because the economic conditions were horrible around it, but a lot of people realized that another world was possible and we could switch things up. People could do their jobs from home. People could work better. And the excuses that so many people were giving so easily about why change couldn't happen and you couldn't live a better life are slowly falling by the wayside here. This is not a good job, he says. At 7 a.m., our warehouse is 100 degrees. We don't have air conditioning. We have cooks in the kitchen on the fryers that are 130, 140 degrees, making chips and sweating like pigs. Meanwhile, the managers have AC. I make $20.50 an hour after 37 years here. Most people make between $16.50 and $20 an hour. I haven't gotten a raise in a decade. 3 years ago, I got a $600 bonus that was taxed. And 3 years before that, I got another $600 bonus. That was my only quote-unquote raise for 10 years. This is from a Fortune 500 company that is making billions. I can tell you that many people have had heart attacks in the heat at the Frito Lay factory since I've been here. One guy died a few years ago, and the company had people pick him up, move him over to the side, and put another person in his spot without shutting down business for 2 seconds. That's crazy. And we've seen this happening in other places. We've seen this happening at Amazon. We've seen it happening before at a place like XPO Logistics, which is a shipping company that also has a really horrible record. I mean, you got to think this is a really common occurrence in American factories that people just are not speaking up about because they don't think that they can change anything. Like the capacity for change that American people think that they have has been so just drummed out of them. It's really clear and kind of awful to see. He says this used to be a bomb place to work. We had picnics together. We'd go to Worlds of Fun. We'd have community lunch served. We had community lunch served, Christmas ham, Thanksgiving turkey. We do all that. These days do absolutely nothing for employees. We work them. We send them home. It's demoralizing, and it's truly nuts. So a Fortune 500 company can get away with this kind of foolishness. I stay here because in 2 years I'll be 62. And I'll have a union pension acquired over 37 years. Imagine if these people didn't have a union. There's a lot of people in meatpacking factories that work under the same or worse conditions, and just factories all over the country that don't have unions, that don't have people stepping up for them and having them at least the ability to say, 62 years to 40 years, 4 decades after running the crap out of my body, I'm going to be able to sit there and say, at least I got a union pension I can subsist off of until I die. So that there is at least there for some people, but even still, it's kind of hard to compare in this kind of many-tiered system of American labor, but how bad is the life? Like, how do you compare that to someone who doesn't? It's really, really tough. People see that and they realize how everyone's hiring and raising their pay because no one wants to work for $8 an hour anymore. I think that's a very, very good point. We would rather nobody buy any Frito Lay products. He says, so yeah, Fritos, Doritos, Tostitos, Funyuns, Cheetos, all those we're on strike. We make those in Topeka, Kansas. We would also rather no one buys PepsiCo products while we're on the line. PepsiCo is the owner of Frito Lay. PepsiCo, we'll give you a list here of the PepsiCo and Frito Lay products that you should boycott at least while the strike is going on, and we'll follow the strike for you here. Strike Watch here on Newsflash, always a big part of our show as we are try to be as big supporters as we can of American labor. We want to see that come back. So let's take a look at these PepsiCo, Frito Lay brands here that are pretty big. So let's take a look at this. Lay's, Doritos, Cheetos, Fritos, Sun Chips. Yeah, some of these are pretty good. For example, I love Ruffles. Baconettes, Chester's, Cracker Jacks, Tostitos. Just take you know what? You maybe get a little fat this summer, too much barbecuing, too many movies, too many, whatever. Just lay off the chips for, a little bit. Support these people who are dying 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for all like $15, $16 to $20 an hour there. You can sacrifice your chips for a little bit. You can Miss Vicky's, Rolled Gold, Ruffles, all that stuff. Stacy's, Smart Food, all that stuff. Yeah, take a little bit of a break from it at the time. And of course, you get the PepsiCo products as well. Definitely worth taking a break from as well. Just anything you can do. He says, we're hoping we can get these people back to work with a decent wage and some kind of alternative to all this forced overtime and these kind of suicide shifts. Honestly, I don't know what they're doing how what they're doing is legal. A spokesperson for Frito Lay management told Motherboard, whatever. I'm not even going to care about that. Yeah, so there we go. Don't care about the management statement there. Not going to let that propaganda come over the Spence Walsh Radio Network airwaves under any circumstances. But yeah, so support the Frito Lay workers. Best of luck to them, and hopefully they get out of these awful, awful working conditions sooner rather than later. And best of luck to them. Solidarity for them on this strike. We're going to be following up for you. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Newsflash.